This is Metro Week. Our top story, our continuing look at the candidates for Tucson City Council. This week, we'll hear from the candidates in the Southeast Side Ward 4 and from Tucson's mayor, who is unopposed in the November election. Then our Journalists Roundtable analyzes the city council races.
Welcome to Metro Week. I'm Andrea Kelly. We're continuing our Tucson City Council election coverage today. We'll hear from candidates in the Southeast Side Ward 4. Shirley Scott seeks her 5th term, and Margaret Burkholder hopes to unseat her. As in the other races, the incumbent is a Democrat and the challenger a Republican. To allow us to get straight to the issues here, we've posted the candidates' biographies and campaign contact information on our election website. Now, their studio interview. All right, Ms. Burkholder, we've agreed to start with you, and I'd like to ask how the issues in Ward 4 differ from the rest of the city.
I think a lot of them are really the same across the city, and so this is a citywide election, and it's really looking at issues all over: budget, transportation, roads, first responders, police, fire, parks. So in Ward 4, it's how do those services serve within our community in Southeast Tucson. But I don't think a lot of the issues are very different. I think all families in Tucson want good career options, they want safe neighborhoods, they want amenities that the city provides. So I don't think that would be different from any of the wards.
And Ms. Scott, same question. How do the issues in Ward 4 differ from the rest of the city?
Well, we live in a very dynamic area because although we get city services that are provided throughout the rest of this community, police and fire, parks, and all the rest, waste management picks up our garbage, water is delivered, and so forth. And we're very happy with those kinds of services, although they can all be improved at one point or another. However, what we have in Ward 4 is the opportunity to be the newest economic engine for the city of Tucson. We have a very dynamic area. We have lots of open space and opportunities for investment by those who might be interested in making that kind of investment, and it's already happening. So that's what makes it very exciting in Ward 4.
Now, I want to take what you both just answered, that some of these issues are very similar to the rest of the city. And let's talk a little bit about downtown. We've had a lot of focus on downtown redevelopment, Rio Nuevo, the development of the streetcar. Has that had an effect on kind of pushing Ward 4 issues lower on the priority list for the whole city?
Actually, Ward 4 is still holding its own because even though the streetcar is designed to help the students who live and work at the University of Arizona, and that carries them from the new development of downtown, the revitalization and redevelopment of downtown has really caused a huge influx of students into the downtown area, and we're very happy about that. Also, $1 billion worth of investment on the part of the city's investors and the private investment, and then also more jobs than you can just imagine, and it's huge. So to that extent, the downtown has been redeveloped and revitalized, but it has been very interesting to see that a lot of people who live in Ward 4 actually use some of the facilities, such as the connection to the streetcar. And it is because I actually helped put some bus service into Ward 4, which didn't exist before. And people are then having a little bit of access through the bus system that I put in place, and especially down into the work centers in the down in the southeast side. It is because of those kinds of things that we actually are holding our own. While we cheer and are very happy with the revitalization of downtown, we're holding our own, and we're developing some more dynamic things in Ward 4.
And Ms. Burkholder, same question. How has the downtown focus on downtown affected issues in Ward 4 or placed Ward 4 on the priority list for the city?
In some ways, I can only share from my personal experience. I've lived in Ward 4 for more than 20 years. And for a while, I had a job. I was working at the Children's Museum, and I was commuting to downtown. But before I had that job, I'd probably been downtown a dozen times in my life, because that wasn't a part of my life in my community. It was very much Southeast Tucson in that part. And so I think, do I want a robust and do we want a great nightlife and business down there? We absolutely do. But really, this is about serving all the communities and citizens of Tucson. And so, yes, do we need a robust downtown? And when people come and they look at Tucson, whether they're looking to bring their business here or they're bringing their travel dollars here through tourism or whatever. Is that part of the flagship of Tucson? It absolutely is. So we need that development. But we also know that a lot of people, a majority of their lives are happening in their neighborhoods, in their part of town. Because Tucson is so big, you're not seeing a lot of people that spend time downtown. So I think it's making sure that we balance both of those needs.
Well, I have to say that I did inquire at the Tucson Convention Center at one time whether anyone from Ward 4 ever visited the convention center. It's been revitalized. Rio Nuevo Board has put over $6 million of improvements in it. And to my great delight and somewhat surprise, they have heavy attendance at many of the events from Ward 4 at the Tucson Convention Center. So somehow or other the word is out. You should go downtown and enjoy the convention center, and then to their delight, they can also enjoy the brand new businesses that are thriving right now.
Now, Ms. Burkholder, you both talked a lot about opportunities in Ward 4 and economic development. I want to ask you, how important do you think annexation is in the overall city government planning?
So I had this question brought to me the other day when I was meeting with members from the Tucson Chamber of Commerce. And when you look at annexation, I mean, you want to look at efficiencies, because I've been on the Vail School District Governing Board, and we look at how big a school do we build and how efficient do we get, and then how important small is in feeling safe. And so how do you manage that? I mean, one argument is that you could have the city be just the state of Arizona, and we run everything from this very macro level, or we could have every neighborhood be 1 square mile like you would see with the city of South Tucson. You want efficiencies without being able to lose personalized service. And so I have some concerns about annexation and moving bigger, because right now we're looking at what Tucson, the services they're able to provide with the people that are here. We're not able to provide an adequate level of service within our current boundaries. We're expecting to be able to provide more services, and I know we have half of my school district is in the city and half is out. The schools that are not in the city, they respond when we have to call for law enforcement. It's often the sheriffs who are able to respond quicker than Tucson police is. And so if we annex parts, especially at Ward 4, because that is the outskirts of the city, as you start annexing out, is the community going to get more services or less? So that has to be part of that balance, is where do we find that efficiency? And so for me, it has to be somewhere in the middle, and that has to be a conversation where you look at the data and then you're talking to the people and say, what do you want? And I know there was just an election in Vail about whether Vail should incorporate, and that didn't pass. And so there's some conversation that's going on in the community about so if it didn't pass, do they want to be part of the city of Tucson or do they not? And so some of it, I think, is weighing both of those things. There's definitely arguments to be made for annexation, but there's also arguments for not. And so right now, first, you have to fix what's happening in Tucson and take care of those problems before you can start annexing, because I would worry about losing services.
Ms. Scott, how important is annexation to the city's long-term plans?
Annexation is actually looked at very carefully by the City of Tucson Annexation Department. And what they do is they have a grid and a schedule that says, would this work for the City of Tucson? Could we in fact support this particular annexation? And to date, every annexation that has occurred has been sustainable and self-sufficient. So I'm not as concerned as my opponent has said, because I think it's been working. And when you have a new annexation come into the city of Tucson, you get state shared revenues along with that. So that's the balance. They bring revenue to their own annexation, and that offsets any additional costs. Now, with regard to the recent Vail vote, long before they took that to the voters, where unfortunately it failed, and I was very supportive of their effort, they did try with all of the surrounding areas, including the city of Tucson, to try to ask if the city of Tucson could possibly annex them in. And because there's no commercial piece in that district that they had delineated, that's why the city of Tucson, nor Sahuarita, nor Benson, nor anyone in the area was willing to entertain them coming into the city, because in that case, it wouldn't pencil out. And so those are the kinds of details that are very important for all to be concerned about. So whereas I was very supportive and hoping that they could incorporate annexation, I don't think is on the table for them at this time.
I want to ask you a question about the, as we speak, ongoing Suntran bus strike. How will the city play a role in preventing future strikes? Long-term thinking here.
Well, I think there's a good possibility that the Regional Transportation Authority might be asked to absorb this transit system, and they're open to that. They have the ability to tax. They can run it. They can actually take charge of this particular thing. But the Regional Transportation Authority has a limit, and it's only got a 20-year limit on it, and its time has not yet come up. So one of the things that needs to be put before the voters is whether or not they would be willing to renew the Regional Transportation Authority earlier than the actual due date. If the population were to support that, then we could ask, as part of the new organization, that perhaps instead of half-cent sales tax, perhaps an increase in the sales tax to support their efforts would be in line. And some of that, perhaps extra money, should the voters wish to do it, and this came out as a result of conversations, then that money could be used to help support the transportation system, the transit, Suntran, and all of their subsidiaries. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, but that is one answer to this whole business of the strike and so forth.
Ms. Burkholder, you've been nodding.
Yeah, well, I have to say I'm nodding, so I'm trying to listen, but I don't agree with what's been going on. And I think that's going to be one of the big differences between Mrs. Scott and myself. I think there is enough money within the budget to do a lot of the things that the city has been asked to do. So we have a current set of leaders who says, oh my gosh, this is a problem. Let's make it somebody else's problem, instead of taking on the responsibility and saying, this is something it's part of what the city's required to do. Let's do it. And I don't know if we need to tax to be able to run this. The city had the opportunity to look at route efficiencies. The city had the opportunity at looking at nominal fare increases. And when those are taken off the table, decisions that were made last year are now affecting thousands of people who don't have transportation. And it's because they're not willing to make those hard decisions. Would everybody love low fares and unlimited routes? Absolutely. But the reality is, how do you make this sustainable? And the city council has really made mistakes a year ago in how they budgeted for this. And I believe they're not showing strong leadership right now in making this strike end. It's my understanding that they could go to Transdev, that's the parent company to Suntran, and say, we have an agreement. You need to provide those bus services. What's it going to take? And right now, we need to get these routes running because people are depending upon this. And we're now looking at a whole month-long strike, and the parties aren't talking to each other. And I'm not seeing the city council take that leadership role in making sure that the people are being served the way they need to be. And so it's frustrating. And I know I've talked to the Teamsters, I've talked to bus riders, they're frustrated.
We've got 30 seconds left for a response.
I think that the city of Tucson has allocated appropriately the kinds of monies to the Suntran area that has been available. We have been increasing the amount that they have taken from the general fund over many years, and it is up to the management company to manage, and that's their job. We must keep an arm's distance from the Teamsters and the management company. We cannot become involved, and although everybody and his brother would like us to step forward and say, just do it, what we are doing is saying, get to the table. I've said this on radio shows. I'm very, very open about that. I've said very specifically, it's important. You've got to come to the table.
All right, and I'm going to stop you there. Thank you both for coming in. I really appreciate the chance for voters to hear from you at the same time. Democratic Tucson Mayor Jonathan Rothschild has no Republican opposition in this election. I asked him in for an interview to discuss his priorities for a presumed second term. The topic of the month is the Suntran strike. And this week, the Tucson City Council, yourself included, voted to try to push Suntran management in the direction of resolving this strike. And one of the things that the council called for is for Suntran to use any excess money that it's saved in fuel or in employee costs during the strike, because it's not running the full routes, to try to resolve the strike. Do you think that's enough?
I hope so. Andrew, the good news is that for the first time a week ago Friday, the parties sat at the table. They sat at the table again Tuesday and again Thursday. And we're seeing progress towards resolution. One of the issues is the city's very constrained in what it has, and it's made its budget for the year. So the parties need to work within that budgetary amount. Everybody on the council has made that clear, and so the parties need to sit at the table knowing that nobody's going to get everything they want, but we need to get those buses running.
Why did it take so long for the city council to act as a single body?
We acted from day one. I was out and had a press conference and said that Transdev, the contract company, had to come to the table. They've been prepared to be at the table. Why the two parties negotiated by press release for several weeks, I'm not certain. There may be some history there that I'm not aware of from the past, but the good news is there is better communication now. They are at the table, and we're going to continue to press to get it done.
Let's switch to talking some more about your re-election campaign.
Sure.
You're running unopposed, so does that mean you basically have a blank check to do whatever you want in your second term?
I wouldn't say that. What I would say is that, you work hard every day and you hope the community judges you appropriately. And I think we've done a lot of good over the last 4 years, and that's why I'm running again, to continue the progress that we've made. I'm proudest of the progress we've made downtown. We've got market rate housing, we've got a new grocery store, we've got 2 hotels in the works and 1 under construction. But downtown's probably only halfway done. There's a lot more we're going to see. I'm proud of the road work we've done, passing the $100 million road bond issue. We're only about 40% of the way through that, and you can see the work that's been done. I'm proud of the work we've done with Mexico. When I came into office in 2011, there was a lot of hate rhetoric in this state about Mexico. And we've done a lot of work in this community and influenced the state to change that, to change it towards economic development. And we've seen that by huge increases in exports and imports between Arizona and Mexico.
Let's flip this and look ahead. What are your goals in the next term?
Well, continuing the work, we have a lot of work to do still in economic development. We're developing sector partnerships in aerospace and defense, logistics, manufacturing, healthcare, to take what we have as strengths in this community and make them better. We still need much infrastructure work to be done in both the roads and in our water system, again, for economic development. We need to move towards a regional transit authority. I think everybody is in agreement about that now. I have said that since the day I took office, but I now think we have the momentum to get people constructively to the table. And we'll continue to work on the social issues as well. We're nearly to our goal about ending veterans homelessness. And then we'll move to a more challenging task, ending chronic homelessness, or at least putting systems in place that allow people to get into homes quicker. We'll continue our education work. I still believe that the fundamental strength of any community is how well educated our children are for building toward the future.
In our last minute for this interview, I want to ask you about long-term budget solutions for the city. Suntran is a symptom of a bigger problem. Yep. What can you do in your next term?
So we're going to work towards a couple of things, and we absolutely have to. That's the core of everything, and it's not just Suntran, it's police services, it's fire services, it's roads, it's parks. We need to look at and have a community conversation about both property tax structure and sales tax structure. The big task is going to be between annexation, business development, and sales tax and property tax. We need to bring more money to bring more services.
Tucson Mayor Jonathan Rothschild, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Christopher Conover. Tonight on Arizona Week, the closure of the Douglas Hospital and what it means for the healthcare and the economy in the border town.
I'd love to say the future looks bright, but from where I'm standing, it's not looking so bright. And so I'm just going to keep plugging away.
Now our journalist roundtable. In the last 2 weeks, we've interviewed all 6 city council candidates, and I've asked Becky Palak of the Arizona Daily Star and Dylan Smith of TucsonSentinel.com in to break down the races. Thanks for joining me. Dylan, let's start with Ward 1. In that race, the Republican challenger, Bill Hunt, seemed like he didn't draw too much of a distinction between himself and incumbent Democrat Regina Romero. Is that the best way for a Republican to win in these races?
Well, Tucson city elections are, of course, citywide for the council, even though people are running to represent a ward, they're getting voted on citywide. But I don't think you can get too far away from what the people in that individual ward are looking for in a council person, and really not, it's difficult to try and create too much of a contrast. But how do you win if you don't create a contrast, if you don't differentiate yourself, if you don't say that this person has not been doing a great job, and here are the specifics about it? That ends up being tough, especially against somebody who's got more money and more name recognition, and as people have voted for before. It's a difficult job to run against. So
is that a strategic placement of not making that much distinction, do you think?
Possibly, but if you don't, then who's going to make that decision to not vote for the person that they voted for before and vote for you instead? If you don't say why, if you don't create that compelling case.
And then in Ward 2, the candidates talked about the size of the police force and road conditions. How critical do you think those issues are for voters? Are those, say, more important than party affiliation?
Well, I think even though Tucson has partisan elections for our city elections, that a lot of those essential city services with police and fire and roads and parks and water, the things that the city actually provides for people are more important, and especially because we have off-year elections, than they are when we're caught up in a presidential or a congressional round where so much of that party ID plays into who you're going to support.
And in Ward 2, there are more Republicans than Democrats and independents. Ward 4 has more Republicans than Democrats, but independents are the largest voter registration in that block. And we did see that last time Paul Cunningham and Shirley Scott lost in their own wards, but won citywide, which is how you can win those wards here. Do you think that is gonna hurt them this time around, the fact that they did lose in their wards last time?
I don't think that is so much a factor overall, because we do run the citywide elections. It is certainly a talking point for the Republicans, and I think, whenever they can, hit that as much as they can. But I don't really know if that is something that really plays into how people in other wards end up voting for all of the candidates.
And of course, those 2 races we had on our show last week, so if you missed those, you can catch those on our website. Becky, on this show, we talked to Ward 4, and we had Republican challenger Margaret Burkholder challenging incumbent Democrat Shirley Scott. Margaret Burkholder is the only Republican in all of these races with any previous political experience. How does that change that race?
Right. For Margaret, she has some name recognition. People on her side of town have seen her name on the ballot before. That helps her, but these seats are elected citywide, so she does need to be out there telling people about herself, getting her name out there, and that's just what she's been doing on the campaign trail. She's a really engaging, high-energy speaker, and she's talking a lot about what it was like to be on the Vail School Board in a time when that school district became one of the top school districts. She's pointing to that experience and saying how she would apply those leadership skills on the city council.
Have you guys seen all of these candidates all 6 of them out on the campaign trail very much?
It's been fairly quiet thus far. I think now that we're getting much closer to election day, we're going to see that start picking up quite a bit more, I think.
And there are, I think, 4 opportunities for the public to hear these candidates in a debate or a forum setting coming up. So really, these campaigns are gaining steam.
Just kind of picking up at this point.
Yep.
Now, Dylan, earlier in this season, back in May, when all the candidates qualified to get their names on the ballot, we had the Republican Party chairman and Democratic Party chairman in for an interview, and Bill Beard of the Republican Party said he talked to dozens of people trying to get a Republican on the ticket for mayor. Talk a little bit about why there's no opposition to Mr. Rothschild.
Nobody wants to run for the job. And in fact, it was the Republicans really had to beat the Bushes to come up with the slate of candidates that they did to get 3 so that they could run a slate race, which has some campaign finance implications for them. It was good for them that they actually came up with the 3, but they sent out emails for months saying, we need people, if you're interested in running, please talk to me. And it took a lot of work for them to get this together, and nobody really wanted to tackle that top job. It is pretty hard for Republicans to win in Tucson city elections, although it's been certainly done before. But there wasn't nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to tackle Rothschild, and that's kind of, you can see how much money he's raised, and it would be difficult. And really, I think that kind of hurts them overall. They don't have that standard bearer who is, running to be that, what many people assume is the top person in the city, even though it's kind of more of in many ways, a figurehead position.
And then, Becky, I also wanted to ask you if that means that, people just get what they get with this current Democratic mayor, just as they did before when there was very little opposition to Republican Bob Walkup.
This time, yes. Again, the Republican Party didn't field the candidate. They didn't find someone who wanted to put in those long hours it takes to run for mayor. This mayor is experienced. He's got a platform with issues that appeal to a broad audience, and he has been really strong on fundraising already. So there are also 3 independent write-in candidates, but we haven't seen them so far campaigning at all.
And of course, any of them will have to get more write-in votes than Mr. Rothschild gets in the bubble sheet, which is
Correct.
If you're not doing a lot of campaigning.
I'm going to put my money down and say that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's good to have other people in the conversation, probably. I mean, if there ends up actually being any sort of conversation,
right?
There hasn't a possibility for it, but it's so hard for a write-in candidate to win in a general election.
So we're going with presumed winner at this point with that. Switching to the topic of the month that it's too important to let fall, but also there's been some developments. What is the update on the Suntran strike, Becky?
So the strike's been going on for 5 weeks. Both sides are meeting with a federal mediator, which everyone is saying is progress. There were some days when there were no talks.
Lots of days where there were no talks.
Lots of days where there was no talks, where they were just checking in with the federal mediator. A lot of days where they were making their case through the media instead of to each other. So being back at the table, everyone sees that as a good sign. Limited service on bus routes is continuing to expand. So there are 13 weekday bus routes that are running at longer intervals than normal, and there's also 5 Saturday routes now. So they are getting some drivers, for better or worse. And the union has been asking people to call the mayor and council, and I think the council is feeling that pressure.
And when they took a vote this week to try and encourage the strike to end, specifically, I mentioned it in the interview with the mayor, saying Suntran should put the money it's been saving by not operating a full bus system toward ending the strike. How significant was that vote?
I think it was more of a political statement. They have very limited options. The city council has limited options that they can take. One is they can ask for a performance audit or a performance evaluation of Professional Transit Management. That's the contractor that runs Suntran. Or they can end the contract, which no one wants right now. No one's saying that's a good idea. So they wanted to move the pressure they're feeling from the public onto Professional Transit Management to get this strike ended, get people back to work, get people back on buses.
Dylan, how significant is this going to play in the city election when people start getting their ballots?
It really depends on how quickly it gets settled. If it gets settled today or within the next week or so, I think it won't be quite the burning issue when November rolls around. But if this drags out for weeks more, that it's going to be still top of mind for a lot of people.
You think that once it ends, it will slip people's minds?
For some people, if you've been somebody who hasn't been able to get to work very easily, it's still going to be there. But which way that political repercussion goes is kind of, I don't know. One thing that's really interesting about this is now you have Republicans talking about how necessary it is to have public transit, which is something unusual. They've always wanted to cut it.
Did you have something to add, Becky?
I just wanted to add that early voting begins October 8th, so that's really a lot closer than we think, only a few weeks out. People who care strongly about this topic, it'll still be top of mind. And then there's other issues on the ballot that people might want to turn out for, like the red light camera question.
All right, thank you both for coming in, and we are going to talk about those other topics in the coming weeks. Ballots are going out soon, and we're going to discuss the other issues, including the countywide bond elections and the Oro Valley recall election. Thanks for watching.